It was kind of at that moment that I was like, I've been repressing queerness within my life to such a degree that
Mm.
I kind of forgot that I was doing it. Like, I've been trying to change myself instead of just being myself. I fly out to do my basic training. Upon reception, we get the opportunity to sign up for that weekend's religious services. I remember being in the barracks and they're calling down like two religions at a time to come sign up. And they call out specifically Catholic and Buddhism. There were like many moments early on where I kind of had to like stop and reflect like why I'm here is to help everybody become happy. That's at the very base of it all, like that's all it is. Everybody's a Buddha.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Hi, Cassidy from Buddhability here. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe. It'll help the show out, and you'll never miss an episode. If you want more Buddhability content, you can subscribe to our email newsletter in the link below. We put out great content every week. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Buddhability, Joseph. Thank you for joining me this weekend. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation, and I think your story is really, really interesting and unique. So I'm really excited to, get the opportunity to share it with everyone. So to open things up, if you can just introduce yourself, a little bit of context about who you are. So take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Cassidy, for having me on here. My name is Joseph Aguilar. I grew up in a military family, very military. Both of my parents were in it, both of my grandparents were in it, all my uncles were in it.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
really, yeah.
real deep American military.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was born in Texas and spent the first few years of my life there. And then we moved to Germany, and then we moved to West Point, New York, and then we landed in Kansas, where I spent all my high school years. And then after high school, I went to college in Texas, found the practice, came back to Kansas. So that's the broad overview of it. And along with that, my family and myself was very Christian. I was brought up in Catholicism, and wasn't like most Christian kids, are just Christian by default, but I was very ardently Christian, very proudly Christian, and so it was entirely inconceivable that I would ever even venture outside of it, let alone do something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. I mean, especially to have sort of, I guess, growing up with like almost like this family lineage, right? We are all military, we are all Christian. I think it's challenging for a lot of folks, regardless of what the background is, to grow up in a family where it's all like, okay, this is our family path. I mean, I imagine it would be, yeah, kind of challenging, especially if you're kind of like, well, I don't know if all of this fits for me. So, following in your family's footsteps, I know you ended up enlisting in the Army. So can you tell me like a little bit about how you got there? And I know, you went to college in Texas too. So maybe a little bit of that path.
Yeah, so when I turned 18, about the time I graduated, I basically had this sort of existential crisis, existential breakdown. There was two aspects of it. There's, for one, for myself, there was this identity crisis where I kind of had to have a personal reckoning that I didn't know who I was, really. I had been, I grew up very, very shy and very self-conscious, very awkward. So I would kind of form my personality according to the circumstances, especially since I was military moving around. So I just kind of like play around. But by the time I turned 18, I was like, wait, who am I again?
Yeah, that makes sense.
At the heart of it, I realized there's this like very deep fear within me about people discovering who I am. There's that side of it. On the other side, kind of realizing just how messed up the world is.
Hmm.
Started kind of reckoning with the realities of suffering, the depth of it that, is completely incomprehensible. And, seeing everybody around me just not happy, everybody was just kind of like existing. Nobody was really
Hmm.
thriving. So, it became my mission in that moment very consciously like, all right, look, I do exist, other people exist. So there is something connecting all of that. There is something at the root of it. And most people are, right now I might not know what it is, but I decided to dedicate my life to finding the religion, the philosophy that adequately, comprehensively explains it all. That was basically my mission when I set out for college. And so I didn't have anything to guide me. I was like, look, I gotta leave the church if I'm gonna really understand the world, because the church can be kind of insular in a lot of ways. So if I'm gonna understand other people, if I'm gonna help other people, I gotta see things from outside my own perspective. So, spiritually departing from the church, I went away armed only with the compassion of Christ. I was like, look, Jesus seemed to have it figured out in some ways, so I'm going to kind of follow his example and do my best for others. And when I set out, I had three very specific standards. One, it had to have salvation for evil people, and mainly because it had to recognize the humanity of evil people. So recognizing, universal humanity. Whatever their definition of evil was, evil people had to have salvation of some kind. Number two, it had to be so simple a child could understand it, but so profound that it could move nations.
Wow.
And then three, it had to basically have actual proof, as we would say in Buddhism. It had to do something in your environment. It couldn't just make it feel good or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So those were my three standards, and that's kind of like my mentality going through college. Like, I don't care if it takes my whole life. I know it's out there somewhere. We've been living around here 2,000 years. Someone had to figure it out.
Wow, I gotta just say, it's really remarkable that at that age you were seeking in that way. I wonder if for me, because I grew up around Buddhism and in a sense taking that kind of perspective for granted, to be able to see the world that way. But I imagine there's got to be so many people in the world, right, that are seeking, there has to be something more. There has to be an answer to these questions that I have, or a philosophy, a practice that I can actually change things. So as you're going through college, were you finding any answers? I know you didn't start practicing Buddhism until a little bit after that, but what was that journey like?
So it was interesting. It was, because I was trying to engage with everyone, everything around me, right? The truth is right here in front of me. I just gotta peel away the layers to find it. And like I said earlier, I was, grew up very awkward, shy, and self-conscious. But at least growing up, I had my Christian faith to fall back on. Now in college, I had nothing to fall back on. That sense of identity was absent, and so the social anxiety started to become a lot, and I would overthink a lot to the point that I felt like a broken robot. That's kind of how I would describe it to myself. Seems like everybody else can function on autopilot, but I'm over here overthinking how to make coffee in the morning.
Yep.
It was painful in that way. But I was approaching everything with doubt, purposeful doubt, trying to slice things down to the bare components to see what's at the root of it. And so that's kind of what led me into science, right? So ended up kind of exploring science, and that kind of led me to healthcare because it's very hands-on. You are helping people, right? Yeah, that's really what I want to do. Just help people, be of value to others. So at the end of it all, felt like I had kind of gone nowhere. I was just all right, well, I graduated college, and now I'm what the heck was that all for? By that point, I became an EMT. I was working on a private ambulance service, and kind of one day I was at my grandma's house, and her friend was over asking how I'm doing. I'm yeah, just doing my thing. It's just well, why don't you join the army? At that time in particular, I took that kind of seriously. I was yeah, okay, maybe I should join the army. I don't know, why not? I found myself in a position where I could train as an army nurse and get an LPN license. I was always kind of interested in that, so I was all right, let's do that. January 2nd, 2019, I fly out to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to do my basic training. And upon reception, we get the opportunity to sign up for that weekend's religious services, right? I remember being in the barracks and they're calling down 2 religions at a time to come sign up, and they call out specifically Catholic and Buddhism.
Oh.
So this is a very fork in the road moment for me, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So I'm walking down to the sign up place. I'm like, debating in my head, like, should I just go with Catholicism? Should I try out Buddhism? What should I do? And I come out into the room, and to my left, there's this long line of Catholics, and to my
Mm-hmm.
right, there's this one guy signing up for Buddhism. And in that moment, I thought to myself, I was like, when I tell people this story, they're going to think I chose this out of convenience. But
Mm.
I wasn't being convenient. I wasn't being lazy. I was just, I don't know. It was sort of a reflection in the mirror moment where I
Mm.
could stay with what I know, stay with what's familiar, and never, basically retreat from that original goal, right?
Mm.
Stop seeking and just stop. That's what it
Yeah.
felt like.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, let me sign up for Buddhist, see what this is all about. Fast forward a couple days later, and a whole bunch of us were going to the church where it was being held. And I'm expecting bald men in robes, quietly, peacefully doing whatever I thought Buddhists do.
Yeah. Common thought. Yeah.
So I walked into this foyer, I was like, I have made a mistake. I have. And I literally trying to walk back out until I remembered, but I can't walk out. Like, I'm basically training. I don't have a choice. I have to be here. I'm stuck. So I sit down. And I'm like, I'm really filled with regret at this point. Like, what is wrong with me? What are you even doing with yourself? So waiting for it to start, they had a bunch of intro materials laid out, and I pick up the book, and one of the first things I remember reading was women and evil people can attain enlightenment in this lifetime. And two things stuck out to me. One, women and evil people. Why do you conflate women and evil people? That's kind of weird. Number two, evil people can attain enlightenment in this lifetime. That's freaking nuts. You guys are crazy. It was the audacity that really struck me. It was like, wow, they just like said that so plain and simple. I didn't think anybody would say that. I had had this out like, oh, that's what I was looking for. I didn't think I'd ever actually find it. I wasn't thinking too hard yet. I was just like, all right, well, they checked one box off, I guess. And they start talking. By the way, I didn't see any monks. I saw all ordinary people. I was like, who the heck are all the priests? Where are all the monks? But they had a woman talking. I don't even remember what she was talking about, but I just remember like everything that I was reading and everything that I was hearing was like striking me real hard, just like hitting the chord. And in that moment, it felt like, you know, 1,000 lifetimes had led me to this moment. Like it was very surreal. It was very surreal. It felt like this massive gong deep within inside my life had been struck for the first time in 1,000 years, and like all the dust was starting to rattle off, and it was felt like it was almost an out of body experience. Like I literally felt like I was about to like break out of my body. So that was my first experience. I walked out and it felt like I literally woke up from a dream. I was kind of like just foggy ahead, like where am I?
Wow.
What am I doing?
Hmm. Well, it's so different from like everything you grew up with, right? Like it's a completely different like life philosophy, a way of being, a type of practice. And not only that, but like it's different than what you were expecting. And one question I want to ask kind of jumping ahead maybe is as you started practicing more, did you learn why it said women and evil people?
Yeah. What it comes down to is that all things possess the Buddha nature. It's like the spoiler at the end of the road here. Like all things possess the Buddha nature, flat and simple. And the Buddha nature being enlightenment itself, the law of life, and we'll kind of talk more a bit about this, but like, everything's the product of the same law.
Hmm. The thing to me that's really interesting as a woman is that like at the time the original Buddha like declared this, right? Society was a caste system and like women were not treated equally to men, right? So the idea that evil people and women, in a sense, that everyone has this Buddha nature. And I think for me, that's something really like remarkable, especially for that time. So, anyway, I just wanted to say that. But after leaving that meeting, you could have just been like, that was enough. I'm not into this. But obviously you're here. So like what happened after that?
So like everything I was reading,
Mm.
because I'm a book reader, everything I was reading was like it felt like it was addressed to me in a letter. It was all
Mm.
making sense. So, because it was talking about the 10 worlds. from hell to Buddhahood
Mm-hmm.
and everything in between. Like he was describing like the world of hell, hunger, animality, anger, humanity, heaven, and then the four noble worlds. But specifically those six lower paths, like it felt like it was describing my life over the past several years. Of, I mean, my whole life. It just made sense. It was very logical. It was describing states of life that we experience. Everything was very logical in that way, and so in basic training, we're not allowed any reading material except religious material. The SGI, they had, they published magazines and newspapers, and the members would bring it to this intro meeting and distribute it to the soldiers. And so I could load up on all these magazines and newspapers and take it back to my barracks. And just, because I love reading. So I was like, all right, let me just read all this because I ain't got nothing else to do. So, just once again, like it doesn't matter. Like there was never a point in my practice, in my experience, where I read something and it's like that's irrelevant. I'm just reading all this material, and it, yeah, just like like the world started to make sense again. And I was trying to chant at that time too, which was unbearably awkward.
Yeah, because you're sharing space with people, right?
So I would sneak away, which was kind of breaking the rules. But at night, I would sneak away to like find a corner to chant,
Mm,
and I could only go to these meetings once a week. I wasn't able to be visited by anybody, so
yeah.
I would only hear the sound of daimoku, what we refer to
Mm-hmm.
chanting Namyo Renge-kyo. Hear the gongyo, the longer form chanting. I only hear this once a week, very small snippets.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like trying to like nah yo, just like killing myself trying to pronounce this, reading, and they always talked about how you could like get benefits.
Hmm.
Um, you can like change things through this. I'm not really sure why I took their word for it, but I was like testing them basically. Like, all right, let me see what you can do. So so in that beginning period, I was chanting for everybody but myself, right? Like, all right, I think I'm fine. Like, I don't need anything. Just like make everybody happy because they're, make everybody else happy. Then I was like, let me chant for myself. First, I was like, what do I want? What do I need? Yeah, I thought about it. I was like, all right, well, I need confidence because I was completely lacking confidence. I was like, I've been faking it till I make it. I can't fake it anymore. I need to make it, right? So I thought about it, like, if this practice can give me confidence, then I'll truly believe it because I'm not at the end of my rope here. So I started chanting like that, and I was chanting, confidence. And at this point, I was starting to chant twice a day, reading as much as I could, going to every meeting I was able to. And after a month of that, I felt absolutely no different.
So then what'd you do when you're like, okay, nothing's changing?
At that point, I was getting nervous. Like I wanted it to be like for real, but pretty much at that moment, my cousin texted me. She was like, "Hey, I got this male friend
Mm.
who kind of reminds me of you. Maybe you guys would hit it off."
Mm.
So he and I met up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll spare you the saucy details, but it was kind of at that moment that I was like, I've been repressing queerness within my life to such a degree
Mm.
that I kind of forgot that I was doing it.
Wow.
Like, I've been trying to change myself instead of just being myself. So, like, all this repression just kind of started vomiting out of me like a volcano in a way. And, so it took me back to a baseline to start with, where, it's like I didn't like immediately, like, oh, I'm not queer now, I can be confident. It was kind of like, it was another journey process, but now I knew I didn't have to like approach it with fear. There was nothing to be afraid of, spiritually speaking.
Yeah. In that moment, did you feel or recognize, oh, somehow this is a result of me practicing Buddhism? Did that feel like a clear connection at the time?
It was really more of the, in a sense, because it was the morality, right? Like, so I described the practice as like Occam's razor of morality. You can easily cut it down to its most simple component. And at the very base of our philosophy, on the theory side, is that everybody is inherently equal. it's about respecting life, respecting others, respecting yourself. So there's no need to like get caught up in like such superficial details of, gender, sexuality, race. It's just like, you're a human being and you are the foremost treasure of this universe. You as you are complete.
So I wonder, I imagine like this process of chanting and then, studying so much about Buddhism in that time period, you're sort of like ingraining that belief in your own life, and there's a difference too, I think, from like intellectually, like agreeing with something and being able to actually live that way. And so for me, kind of course, this isn't like retrospective looking back, but I sort of see it as like your life had kind of grown to a place where you could really believe, like, okay, yeah, my life is worthy and valuable regardless of this. This doesn't actually have any say on my value as a person. I imagine that realization, though, must have been like disorienting. Like, I'm not to, divulge my own personal queer journey, but like for me there was a lot of like, is this real, am I, like a lot of self-questioning, and then after I'm internally processing, then thinking about like, oh my gosh, how does this change how I show up in the world and how people perceive me? Did you go through any of that process, and if so, like what was it like?
You put it better than I could put it myself, honestly. It was exactly
Yeah.
just process of questioning and accepting and just years long.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of like I just tricking myself, but
Hmm.
the thing, part of the repression process, like I would just have these natural, I don't know, experiences, thoughts, emotions, feelings that would just come out of me whether I liked it or not.
Yeah.
So that's why eventually, like he's like, look, you either accept it or you don't, but these things are just going to keep happening.
Yeah. So then, like, were you in the kind of time following where you're like that years long process? Where does your Buddhist practice like come into play? Was there anything you were chanting about, or maybe like anything you studied that helped you like go through that experience?
So yeah, I was training pretty much every day from the get go.
Mm-hmm.
And chanting in of itself is a very mystic, surreal experience
Yeah.
because it might not be obvious sometimes, like that it's working,
Hmm.
but I have found that like if I do chant in a bad headspace, it it puts you in a better headspace.
Yeah.
But like in the beginning, I was kind of like, am I just like chanting to thin air? But like
Hmm.
over time, I did start to kind of notice like I was showing up in my life more stable, more confident, just kind of more natural, really is what it was. I was just more natural, just kind of being there. And then, I was going to the meetings that they had on the base with
Mm-hmm.
these other military members. And, I'll say this, my early experience with the meetings particular was, you know, it's all ordinary people. There's no priest or, hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was just very normal
Hmm.
was how I saw it. Like normal in a way that you kind of like it was the ordinary people, they have their flaws, they have their own personal lives, they
Mm-hmm.
have, they're all unique in their own aspect. And even though I like had a lot of social anxiety and like a lot of insecurity, despite all that, when I was at these meetings, I felt very normal, like a normal human
Hmm.
being,
Mm-hmm.
which I did not feel throughout college. I felt like I was an alien invading this planet. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been there.
so it kept coming. So that's what kept me coming back. And then, of course, reading once again, I felt like I was like exchanging letters with this pen pal that I couldn't see.
Hmm.
I don't know, publications, but it just kept me coming back because it kept working in this very fundamental way where, like, the moments where I did like turn my back on it, like everything was just confusing again.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm reading a lot and I have like a whole like journal that I started keeping of various quotes that are helping me.
Mm.
And it's like I don't even know where to begin because a lot of things are happening. I was finishing up my nursing program I graduated my nursing program in 2020 in like 2020 March or May.
Oh. Wow. What timing? Wow.
Indeed. So here I am, a brand new nurse, and then bam, COVID hits. We're going to lockdown.
Jeez.
So I was working at an acute care hospital in New
Mm.
Braunfels, Texas, and
Wow.
um, COVID was ravaging everything and everyone. It was it was terrifying. It was really terrifying for a lot of reasons. It wasn't like not just that there was this invisible virus killing everybody, but
Mm.
here I am going to work with people who were very disabled by this virus, like
Mm.
people who became paralyzed, people, whether they had prior medical conditions or not. And then I would go home and see protests in my town against mask mandates and people like family and friends dying that this was happening. I was just,
Mm.
so angry at it all. It was that anger that really drove me, even before, like what drove me to find this practice, like,
Hmm.
just people suffering without looking for a reason or a cause. And it was the practice that helped me like contain the anger,
Hmm.
because without the practice, like I would just, pop off, spontaneously and just make things worse. No one wants to be around a guy that's angry all the time. Being able to come back to the practice and remember this determination to help these people, awaken to the greater reality and not just be kind of stuck in their own mindset.
Hmm.
It was a crazy time,
Hmm.
but it definitely affirmed a lot in the sense that like realizing that people were terrified of the government. I think that's the main reason why people were so unwilling to believe that this was happening. Being able to identify like, yeah, people are scared too, even though they don't like realize it or want to
Hmm.
share it.
What I'm hearing is that because of your practice, one, like, of course, the practice of chanting, but also, again, like this philosophical framework or like way of understanding the world, like you're, of course, feeling this anger and despair, but then you're still, rather than like just feeling hopeless and angry, able to recognize like the humanity or their perspective of somebody that is, going against something that you believe, right? Or the best medical direction, whatever. But did having that kind of awareness of like, okay, everybody here is really scared, even though we're responding to it in different ways, we're all at the same level of like, we're people that are afraid. Did that like transform some of your anger?
It did. It was kind of like everybody's human,
Hmm.
right? Everybody has their, flaws and biases and blind spots and they're thinking, myself included, if not more so. But I had the practice.
Hmm.
And one part, once again, on the theoretical side, like one thing I really appreciated was that it was like an anatomy of the human spirit, of reality. I always thought of it like the Matrix. Like I felt finally able to see the code.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good time to bring up, what Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is. Because so, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, that's the mantra that we chant. Um, and roughly translating it into straightforward English is, devotion to the mystic law of cause and effect through the sound of the Buddhist teachings. I could talk about this all day, quite frankly, but what it embodies, what encapsulates is 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. And, for time and simplicity's sake, I'm just going to focus on the 10 realms are embodied within the 10 realms. So there's the 10 worlds, hell, hunger, animality, anger, humanity, heaven, learning, realization, bodhisattva, Buddha. And in classical Buddhism, and probably most people's ideas, we think of that as like separate realms that you're born into. Um, but what this practice taught was that, like, no, these are life states that we experience at any given moment. Now, for me, the radical part about it is that each world embodies the other 10 worlds. So even if you are at the depth of suffering, the world of Buddhahood is still there. No matter how deep you can, like, Buddhahood exists at every level. That's what was so radical to me. And not only that, but even at Buddhahood, like Buddha contains the wrong hell. And then we have this mantra is physically embodied in what we call the Gohonzon, the mandala that we chant to. What I've come to understand is that it's a mirror for your life. all these different components, all these realms are embodied within yourself. It's all here inside you. And seeking to understand that in its entirety, because it didn't all make sense, but I did very much cling to the fact that like everybody is a Buddha inherently. Not everybody's manifesting Buddhahood, but whether they realize it or not, it's all there. It was, once again, it's like being able to understand the nature of reality. That's also what they describe as the true aspect of all phenomena. And at the root of it all, it's Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. It's this 3,000 realms of a single moment of life. And I love discussing the theoretical part of it, but that's not the important part of it. It just.
But I think like it's, there's some people that, wonder like, oh, do I have to understand all of this before I start chanting? Do I need to understand it ever? No, you can chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and it will work. And like studying as you're practicing and chanting helps you just gain deeper understanding, of like how this practice is working, how you can use it, deepening your understanding of like the interconnectivity of all life. Understanding really what is the core of this philosophy just strengthens, I think, your faith and ability to determine and really like use this tool to its like max capacity, but for somebody listening, if they're like, oh my gosh, I don't understand that, that's okay. It's, at some point you'll understand it, but you just need to try chanting and see if it will work. But I mean, I too, like, I love studying because I think, yeah, sometimes I have no idea what it means, but then I chant about it. And then, we might understand something intellectually, but then to really understand it with our life is kind of a different thing. Like we were, talking about earlier. But it's, yeah, interesting that too, like this deepening of your study and really like trying to understand what is the absolute heart and core of this Buddhism, which is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Through that, then you can understand kind of what's happening in the world and be able to humanize others and have hope, humanize yourself. During that time, it's very challenging and sounds like you're deepening like this understanding even more because of all of the like kind of chaos around you. And as you were going through that, like, how were you feeling about nursing? How were you feeling about being in the military? Was anything changing, I guess?
Everything was very much changing. I would like to reemphasize the point that while I can prattle on about theory, you don't need to know the darn thing. If you just, the Daishonin himself says you enter through faith alone. You can have every writing of Buddhism memorized to heart, but doesn't mean you're going to be any closer to actually understanding it than someone who simply chants with faith and the belief in universal Buddhahood. So going back to that time where internally everything was changing on such a fundamental level. My relationship with healthcare was kind of interesting. I love nursing, I love it. That's why I do it. But I had originally got into the medical field because I felt like I had nothing else to help people with. I did have to kind of reevaluate my relationship with it because I was like, even from the very beginning, I was kind of like shouting out to the world, no, like everybody has to know, get the word out. And it was just this huge eureka moment for me. But with the Army, it was very difficult. Now it's like my world outlook had fallen into place in a way where now it's incongruous with my position. And obviously we all want to defend our country and fellow man, but war is not the way to do it. Peace will not be achieved at the end of a gun. I was in a very conflicting spot. So, when I was able to get out of the Army, I took it and pretty much never looked back.
Yeah, so you've had this kind of grappling again, almost like a new level of like the self-identity, like who am I really? What are my values? I'm out. Once I'm out, I'm done. And what happened after you left the Army?
Now I'm just working as a nurse in ordinary life, which was great. And once again, things were always happening. There's so many little ways that the practice works that you don't expect. And at first, it feels, the natural response is like, oh, it's a whole lot of coincidences. But for one thing, they keep happening.
Yeah.
For another thing, you talk to other people who try the practice and they have pretty much the same experience, sharing the practice with others. Because I wanted to be happy. I was like, please stop
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
Do this practice and be happy. More than anything, I just wanted to share the practice because I recognized what Nam-myoho Renge-kyo was as, the essence of our true selves. So, we have this book series called The New Human Revolution, which talks about the development of the Soka Gakkai from 1960 onwards, and it's written by the third founding president, Daisaku Ikeda. And so I get this book. As I read, I kept reading about how he would just, talk to people and encourage them. That was another thing that like motivated me to read it, was like how to encourage people who are suffering, because I was just very bad with words. I didn't know what to do, what to say. So I was like, how to help these people. So reading this book, with that purpose in mind. And, President Ikeda he has a way of saying things so simply. So over time, like I did develop this bond, like sharing in his mission to help everyone become happy. Because that's what he gave his life to. Just like helping everybody recognize their true value and, accomplish their mission in life, whatever it may be. There were like many moments early on where I kind of had to like stop and reflect like why I'm here. It's to help everybody become happy. That's at the very base of it all. Like that's all it is. Everybody's a Buddha. He was, able to fully recognize that and help other people awaken to it. So, now, I take him as my mentor as well. I try to live up to that same level of standard. And so everybody that I dragged to a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
them walked away without gaining something. Like you could tell something like about it resonate with them. Like literally everybody.
Hmm.
And then everybody that chanted, things would happen.
Hmm.
Like I would see friends like bad work situations suddenly get a new job. I would see like friends like come into just $1,000s out of nowhere. A
Wow.
couple families started businesses. So it's just like when you change, your environment changes, and that's what was happening. Everything was changing around me, and that was also another thing that kept encouraging me, like seeing that actual proof happen over and over again. Like let's see how far this thing can go. Like I want to change everything. But it requires a lot of what we call human revolution, that internal change. The more changes you want to see, the more you have to change. That can be very difficult, but that's why I practice. Just I think that's kind of a good spot to emphasize that Buddhahood, enlightenment isn't like a state that we achieve and once you do it, you're done. It's a continuous process. It's an active process.
Yeah. I mean, because as we chant, to your point, like it's a practice and daily practice, right? That we're always tapping into this enlightened nature of our lives, which, for those that are like kind of brand new to this, we characterize Buddhahood as limitless courage, wisdom, and compassion. And these are all like characteristics of Buddhahood, and they exist within all of us. It's not like you chant and somebody is granting you courage, you're pulling it out of your life, or you're strengthening it. And so, yeah, you leave the military and you're like seeing all of these, changes in your environment. And I know now you're a school nurse, right? How long did it take you to get that role? Why did you go that route? And how has it been?
I graduated 2020 and I started 2023 school year at this elementary school. So the journey there, so this is actually a good opportunity to bring up another principle or whatever that really helped guide me in those early years in particular. So there's this whole writing. So we have this book, The Writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Nichiren Daishonin, he was the Buddhist philosopher monk in 13th century Japan that revealed Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So he has all these writings that he gave to his followers at the time, but one of them is titled "Earthly Desires Are Enlightenment," which was another like radical, audacious thing to me. I kind of vibe with it, but it was also like what does that mean? Your earthly desires are enlightenment. You know, And while intellectually I was confused by it, internally something about like really resonated with me that your desires are, reveal something about your true self. And I think from a queer perspective in particular, it's very radical. Your desires are who you truly are in one sense. Now, with that said, it's not like, every impulse, we don't reject life, but we
Mm-hmm.
also don't like indulge either. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just no way.
Yeah.
Use wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
for reasonable people.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, coming from that Christian background where you were penalized for liking certain things, and even just like from a classical Buddhist mindset where people think you had to like give up desires, possessions, and that's the way to live life. I could engage with my desires in a more healthy manner,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Once again, like obviously I'm not going to indulge and be reckless, but I don't have to like be afraid of it either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really like the idea that whatever kinds of things that you want in your life or sufferings you have, those are actually like the fuel that you can use to propel your life forward rather than like you need to run away from those things. Um, because like very naturally, like if I want a specific job, right? Like I'm going to have to confront my insecurities or my self-doubt that I don't think I can really do it. And that's why it like becomes this fuel, right, for me to develop this courage and self-confidence. To your point, like I don't have to run away from those things. And sometimes like, the only question you really need to ask yourself, like, should I chant for this thing, is like, well, if is it going to support your happiness? Is it going to support the happiness of other people? Then yeah, go for it. And as you chant, either like I've found, either I get the thing that I want, or maybe I like kind of change the direction of what I want, or I realize like actually this totally like is not for me. So maybe kind of like bringing it back to the path to your job. Like, were you chanting specifically like I want to find a job as a school nurse, or were you first kind of chanting about like I want clarity about what I'm going to do now that I left the military?
About a year into my practice, I was kind of pretty stable at this point with my faith, with where I was. So I wanted to challenge it in a new way. That's another thing I like to encourage people, like
Mm.
challenge it. Like, I ain't gonna
Mm-hmm.
hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You can test it. So I was like, let me chant for a motorcycle.
Nice.
Let me just see what happens. I'm gonna chant for this motorcycle and just see what this practice does. Now, with that said, Buddhism is reason. It's like we don't chant to like manifest something out of the ground, right?
Yeah.
Like, even though sometimes it feels that way, but no, Buddhism is reason. So, being reasonable, I took up a second job with this staffing agency,
Mm.
trying to work to get money for this motorcycle of mine. Doing that second job took me away from the meetings and the meetings. Once again, that's where I felt the most normal.
Hmm.
So having to like sacrifice the meetings started to make me really angry. I was like, to the point where I was like, no, forget this, man. I'm structuring my everything around these meetings. These meetings come first.
Hmm.
And it was at that moment that the client that I was working for very peacefully and graciously was like, hey, since you're in the army and kind of unpredictable with your job, we're gonna find someone else
Hmm.
who's could be more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, we left on good terms, but I was
Yeah.
like, oh, great, now I can go to these meetings
Yeah.
again. So that was this thinking of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward like a couple years later, that same staffing agency texted me and was like, hey, we got an opportunity to work in the Kansas City, Kansas Public School District. Do you want to take it? And at first I'm like, I don't know, working with kids, that sounds kind of scary. But I decided to take it. It turned out to be, one of the best decisions I ever made. So, when I got in, I'm not able to choose where I'm placed. They just place me where they need me. And it so happened to be in this classroom in an elementary school working with medically fragile children in the special education classes. And it's the best job of my life. I love these kids. I love my coworkers. I love everything about it. It was really a pinnacle moment for me in so many ways. So that's where I've been since 2023, and now I'm in my third year. with these kids.
Wow. That's incredible. And it's really encouraging to like for anyone that's not yet to a career that they find that sense of fulfillment. You know, it can feel sort of daunting. Am I ever going to get there? Especially if you don't know, like with this like laser focus, this is the job that I want, but you're kind of like making your way through. There's this perspective in Buddhism that wherever you're at right now is your place of mission, and mission not meaning like some higher powers mission, but like purpose. You know, where you're at right now is actually the where you're supposed to be, and the environment that you're in is helping you, you know, transform whatever you need to, giving you the experience you need to. And even thinking about a couple years earlier when you were at the staffing place, you know, like that was a crucial part of your mission, right? You were able to make those connections. And then later on, that was the key to finding this role that you love now. But you can never predict those things when they're happening, right? Like it's so much just about like, you know, doing the whatever is the next thing in front of you. So now you're working and you love your job. Where would you say you are now, since like you first encountered Buddhism to now? Where are you at with your sense of just like self and identity, queerness too, but like just who you are as a person? You know, you had mentioned like when you were 18, this feeling of like, I just don't even know who I am. And you're like set out on this journey to find out who you are and also like find something that really answered those three questions for you. So where would you say you're at now with all of that?
Solid, to put it simply. Because kind of, you know, the practice is attuning your life to the rhythm of the universe. Right. I think of it in terms of music or sound waves. Like, you know, before I was kind of like clashing with the waves of the universe and just not like being able to harmonize with anything around me. You know, since I chant every morning, you know, like it's like tuning a guitar. Like, you know, now the notes are coming out very beautifully. So, you know, that's why like that's I feels like that's the reason why like things happen so mystically, because it puts you in the right place at the right time. And so now I have this very clear understanding of the world and myself. I mean, it's not like I know everything, but like, you know, because before the practice, I just felt so thin and hollow and empty in a lot of ways that maybe I didn't need to, but you know, that's the whole thing of repression. Now it's like I understand myself in a much deeper way. Like I know like everybody in myself has negative tendencies. That's just another aspect of life. One thing that helps, you know, so going back to the theory of it all, like the root of suffering, like why do we suffer? Why are people unhappy? Well, at the very root of it all is what we call in Buddhism fundamental ignorance. Specifically, ignorance to the true nature of our lives, that we ourselves are entities of enlightenment, we possess the Buddha nature, that we possess the law of life. And from this fundamental ignorance, it gives rise to what we call the three poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness. And from there, you traverse the six lower worlds, you know, hell, hunger, animality, blah, blah, blah. You're kind of just stuck in this, you know, very lower life state. But SGI Nichiren Buddhism, it's about transforming negatives to a positive. So now, you know, fundamental ignorance becomes enlightenment, and from enlightenment comes the three Buddha bodies, you know, wisdom, courage, and compassion. And from there, you gain the ability to, you know, engage with where you're at. You know, we don't believe in coincidences, and once you really start to accept, you know, not accept that, but understand that, like, you are there for a reason, and you have the power to change it. Well, then, you know, it becomes everything becomes your mission, everything becomes your superpower, and it just feels, you know, it feels exhilarating. It's amazing. Like now life is like, it's phenomenal. It's so cool.
Wow, hearing that, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Life is exhilarating. Even when like there are periods where I'm like I don't want to challenge myself or whatever, but I think when I chant, it shifts, right? Like everything that feels like heavy doesn't mean like the challenge has gone away, but I look at it differently and I feel like, okay, this is my challenge. Like I'm ready to go. I'm ready to face it. You know, in today's world, especially in the US, I think like having hope or a sense of possibility or a sense of power in your life is very challenging to feel. And even as somebody that practices Buddhism, you know, on a daily basis, I'm like really having to bring out hope and belief in my life. But when you do it, it's like, okay, a breath of fresh air again. Every time I chant, like, whew, okay, fresh air. I'm ready. I'm ready. So of course I end every episode with asking for a piece of advice. And you've already shared so many incredible, pieces of wisdom. But if you could give a piece of advice to somebody listening today that really wants to live true to themselves, but they don't know quite how, what would you tell them?
Be patient. Be patient. It's okay. Like you'll find it. But don't never give up. Because we are a microcosm of the universe, and in that regard, we are each infinitely complex. So life is a whole process of discovering who you are. But at the root of it all, you embody everything about the universe, and you are more valuable than all the treasures within the universe. You are all you need to be. Take your time, you'll find it. And this practice is the quickest way to discover who you are. If you're someone who's testing the practice, test it, challenge it, be audacious with it. Life takes audacity. Being yourself takes audacity. You have to be bold and courageous. And one quote I'll share in particular from Nichiren Daishonin here. This is from the Gosho titled Reply to Kyo'o. He says, "A sword is useless in the hands of a coward. The mighty sword of the Lotus Sutra must be wielded by one courageous in faith."